introduce this
story. Our country has gone through a very difficult process. There is still much left to be done. Our country is still not reconciled. I do not think a war crimes code for Liberia will be the best thing. We are a very small country made up of less than maybe 4 million persons. And the interrelatedness of the families are so tight. If you drag one person to court, the families that are attached, it will just have a ripple effect. Of course, the war didn't come out of the sky. There were shortfalls in previous governments that created a platform that people felt they had no other option, and it escalated in what we had. And whether you were involved fully in arranging the war, whether you sat on the side and say, hey, I'm not a part of what's going on, we've all played a role somehow. And I think we should just leave it where it is and move forward. How do you ensure that whether you live here or whether you live somewhere else, there's safe drinking water and there's electricity and that there are jobs? I think that's where our energies need to be. It can no longer be about the past. I would hate to see a war crimes code brought to Liberia. It will not reconcile us. It will not bring back the past. It will not pay for the destruction of our nation. And it will definitely not put back the fabric of our country that has been destroyed as a result. There are different aspects to all of us. And so when you ask the question, who is Charles Taylor? I guess we must look at it in the different aspects. If you look at him as a father, he loved his children, he wanted the best, and he had a good relationship with them. So you can imagine how distraught they feel. He became the focal point of the Taylor family. He took care of everyone. So we all miss him at different levels in the family. But then people on the other side could say, well, there are plenty of families in Sierra Leone where the fathers and the mothers have been killed as a result of the war. There are families here in Liberia who've lost entire members of their families. And there's no way we can bring it back. As an elder statesman, president of a nation, you will find out that the different segments of our population had a personal relationship with him. So I think he's...
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Joah, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to our special edition of Focus on Liberia. We're going to be discussing or critiquing, analyzing the Senate's response or their position on the TRC recommendations. As you may recall, the president of Liberia asked the Senate on the implementation of the TRC for advice, and the Senate responded with a 24-page document advising the president on how to proceed with the TRC implementation. With me to discuss this, I have joining me from Monrovia, Atty. Mmonbeydo, Nadine, Joah. Atty, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be on your show once again.
Also, thank you, and we're glad to have you. Thanks so much for the work you've been doing, and we're glad to have you back. Also joining us from, I always get this thing wrong, Dublin, is Tennen Benedictus Dalieh, who is a PhD student at Dublin University. Welcome, Tennen, to Focus on Liberia once again.
Thank you so kindly, Mr. Joah.
Our topic today, as I stated earlier, is a discussion on the Senate's position on the TRC recommendation. And so I have someone who is researching transitional justice in Liberia in her PhD study, Tennen, and also someone who is right now involved in legal issues, especially pertaining to women and children, Atty. Mmonbeydo, Nadine, Joah, and we're here to discuss. We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. Let me start by asking the both of you your initial response or reaction when you read the Senate's position on the TRC recommendation. Let me start with Attorney Mmonbeydo, Joah.
Well, Dennis, when I read the Senate's position that was masqueraded as innocent and well-grounded recommendations, I was sad because for me it intended to water down what is actually needed for Liberia. When you look at the Senate, the composition of the Senate, you see men there. I don't want to say women because none of them have been indicted, but men who are the ones should be going to the war crimes court, for whom we're calling accountability for. You see Senator Prince Johnson, you see I don't want of Senator Fanny Sherman. Those are notable names for war and economic crimes court that have been indicted by the international community and in Liberia that are known to have committed those crimes. So if you see their names on a petition recommending Truth and Justice Commission and going contrary to what is being called for by civil society who work daily on the ground, I think then we have to take a second look at those recommendations. And for me, it is sad because the people voted for them largely because they wanted justice after many of these years of the years that people have been, discriminated against and traumatized. And I think when Liberians finally felt that this is a time that their leaders should work for them, they should put forth those recommendations. And in this slide, let me just applaud Senator Yumbi Kanga for not signing that particular petition because it doesn't represent the views of the people of Liberia.
Thank you. Thank you. Tennen, let me hear your initial reaction to the Senate's position.
I was disappointed, but not surprised. Based on the work that I do as a research student, in transitional justice, universal jurisdiction, not so surprised because these things happen within the context. However, the disappointment, right, is based on, firstly, the nature of the work that was done. So I would think a little more, depth would be given, critical reading, critical analysis of the context of, what the Senate, would basically, a picture of where we were as a country, where, where we've come from as a country, where we are now, and, make a projection into the future. Based on all of that is you can make a recommendation. However, as the document seemed, and maybe I want to give, before we go into the the entire work, the actual work, just a reflection of it. It basically is this sentimental piece, right? It's like the person is like, say something, and then the Senate is like, yes, obviously we want to say something, and this document, is a response to saying something, instead of being a critical tool towards this reconciliation that all of us, right, want. But I mean, later on,
Right.
I can go, yes, into the context of the work, and we all make a sense of, what this document is and how I think of it as, an unfortunate piece of work that we, as a librarian, I really am. I am so ashamed of, what was put out there as a reconciliative tool or as a recommendation to the government. But again, for me, it is a disappointment again and not being surprised. Yeah.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia. We are discussing the Senate's response or their position on the Truth and Reconciliation recommendation. My guests, Attorney Mmonbeydo, Nadine, Joah, and Tennen Benedictus Dalieh. So what we have before us is the Senate's position. They're responding to the TR. But let's go a little bit step back and see what really this whole TRC implementation should look like after the final report was given by the TRC Commission. What are the next? What was supposed to be the next steps? Because this happened like over 10 years ago now. Walk me through the steps right after the final report was released and throughout the implementation process. What should it look like?
Mr. Ja, I rather would want us start with this document,
Yeah.
to go back into time. At my first appearance was basically talking about,
No,
the TRC, the different
right.
processes and all of
No,
it.
I get that. What I want my readers, my listeners to know is after the report was issued, where it's supposed to go? Should it go to the president send it to the legislator, and the legislator send it to what's supposed to be the next steps? That's what I want to get before we go through that document.
Yes, I get it. So, okay, on the basis of it, the act establishing the TRC, which is mentioned and mentioned erroneously again, just for the reference of it, had mentioned that the head of state, after the report is given, the head of state, right, should report to the national legislature within 3 months. So that was in December when the final report was given, and then by that time you had the commissioners disagreement, all of it. However, notwithstanding, the act did not say whether the commissioners are making any confusion whatsoever. It stated section 48, right? And I want to read verbatim. It states, the head of state shall report to the national legislature within 3 months of receipt of the report of the TRC, and on a quarterly basis thereafter. Quarterly basis. So that would be 3 months after every 3 months. Um, there should be implementation, so you do a plan, and after every 3 months, like short term, long term, and into the future. um all recommendations shall be implemented, in caps. All recommendations shall be implemented. There is, however, a condition where the implementation of any recommendations have not been compiled with. The legislature shall require the head of state to show cause for such non-compliance. All recommendations should be implemented. If it cannot be implemented, the head of state should write why it has not been complied with, and maybe a projection of when it can be. So back into the context of how we've operated as a country, right? You ask, where have we been? A lot of the people who were named in the TRC report were in public space, so much enough to influence where, the process would go, beginning with our head of state, President Johnson Sirleaf. At the judiciary, at the Supreme Court, we have Honorable Cabinet Jana also. And in the legislature, we have a whole bunch of, from Adolphus Dolo to the rest of them, Prince Johnson, Honorable Elvin Melvin Snow, who was named, on the UN sanction, who was placed on the UN sanction list. So this is the context we operated. And then one of it, which was very contentious again, which was mentioned in this report, someone, after the report was released, and there's conversation around lustration, which barred, people who were named in the report from not participating for 30 years in public space. So someone took it to the Supreme Court. Now you're taking my complaint to myself, you know so that's
Yeah.
the simplest way I can make you under the listening audience to understand this. Honorable
Thank you.
Cabinet Jana was there, and obviously, he also signed onto the comprehensive peace agreement in Accra, just so we have the understanding or the context. So logically, I mean, he might have his opinion, the rest of it, but it makes sense that the opinion thereafter, right, would say that, oh, everyone has got their rights as citizens and should participate. The rest of the other recommendations contained have been somewhat controversial, somewhat ignored, somewhat downplayed, right? There are
Thank
other
you.
processes.
And we're gonna go into that. I just wanted, because I myself got confused as this TRC became almost like a football. You pass it to one person, they pass it back. So let me summarize for the benefits of our audience the TRC, what came from the Senate. So the document from the Senate on their position is a 24-page signed by chair, and we'll go to their names because it's important. So it started with an intro which talk about the TRC and the roadmap and how it has been coming out of the Accra Comprehensive Peace Agreement. It went into the background of the Liberian civil crisis, the different warring factions, and the different peace agreements that were brokered and broken. It lay emphasis on the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord, which is the basis of the establishment of the TRC. Then it went into the mandate of the TRC. What was it about? Discussed the mandate. It talked about the dissenting opinion from members of the TRC, like Councillor Per Brown Bull, Sheikh Kafumba Connor, etc., who disagree with their colleagues, and two of them did not sign. And then the step taken by previous government, including the Salif government, to the TRC, the implementation of the TRC. It really talked about depth into the war crimes court versus a domestic criminal court, restorative justice versus retributive justice, and it looked like they gave a diagnosis, and this group is siding more with restorative and retributive. At the end, they offer some recommendations, and I want to read those recommendations for the sake of the viewing public who have not had the opportunity to read the report. In respect of the issues raised above, the Liberian Senate recommends the following. The President of Liberia should set up a transitional justice commission to perform the below tasks, which should include but not limited to the following. A, to determine why the TRC recommendations have not been fully and timely implemented. B, determine whether the TRC fully comply with its mandate, such as face-to-face meeting between perpetrators of crimes and other offenses and their respective victims. C, to examine the effect of the August 2003 Act of the Legislature, which granted general amnesty to all participants in the civil crisis. D, to analyze credibility, legitimacy issues surrounding the final report of the TRC in respect of the fact that 4 of the commissioners had serious issues with the report, and consequently 2 of the commissioners did not sign the final report, but instead presented dissenting report. E, to examine the effect of the ratification or accession of Liberia to the Rome Statute in 2004 after the end of the civil crisis. F, to consider the separation of the establishment of a war crimes court which has international dimension from the establishment of the economic crimes court. G, to consider the effect of the constitutional and other legal implication of prosecuting war crimes at war crimes court when domestic laws and criminal courts for the same offenses exist. To review the work and recommendations of the TRC where necessary and make additional recommendations when necessary, such as how far back in the Liberia's history should the transitional justice process go. And R, to plan and implement programs and activities to solicit opinion of the majority of the Liberian on the issue of retributive justice versus restorative justice. I also want to mention here the signers. The Leadership Committee of the Liberian Senate, Senator J. Emmanuel Nukwe, Chair, Committee on Public Accounts and Audits. Senator Edwin Melvin Snow, Chair, Committee on Public Works and Rural Development. Senator Prince K. Moyi, Committee on Education and Public Administration. Senator Augustine S. Chie, Chair, Committee of Health. Senator J. Blabo Brown is a distant, the chair on the Committee of Internal Affairs and Governance. Senator Prince Y. Johnson, Chair, Committee on Defense, Security, Intelligence, and Veteran Affairs. Senator Yombly Kanga Lawrence, Committee on Rural Orders Administration. Yombly did not sign. There's no signature here. The rest are named, they signed. Senator Morris G. Setuma, Chair, Senate Committee on Ways, Means, Finance, and Budget. Senator Vani G. Sherman, Committee on Judiciary Claims, Human Rights, and Petitions. Senator James P. Benny, Chair on Committee on Foreign Affairs. Senator Sir H. Joseph, Chair, Committee on Executive. Senator Albert P. Chair, President Pro Tem of the Senate. That's the summary, and those are the signers. Attorney Joah, let's go into the report, starting with the introduction and the background.
Yeah, before I would like to focus on the recommendations because there are many, so that we discuss on it, just before, okay. So just before we go there, I would just like to state that, many people seem to think that when it will bring war or it will threaten the peace of Liberia. But that is not so. I think all of those noise that is coming out is from these people whom we have elected because, some of the people seem to be below the poverty line and they elected these people and they're now in positions of power. So they're wielding the power to spread this disinformation that there will be war if these accountability mechanisms are being set up. And they seem to think that they're in a position to approve whatever court that needs to come here, and they're not, because I remember in 2018, this report went to the Human Rights Committee, and the Human Rights Committee gave Liberia 2 years to respond on how far it has gone with the implementation of these recommendations. And yet they have not reported to the Human Rights Committee. I think we should look and see how far, what is the Human Rights Committee response going to be. However, in response to the many calls for the War Crimes Court, the Senate has proffered these recommendations like you just read. And they said, number one, the president of Liberia should set up a transitional justice commission to perform the below tax. So that in itself is problematic because the TRC recommendation, which came as a result of the Accra Comprehensive Peace Agreement, was very clear that there should be set up a transitional, the commission, okay? And that commission came out with the TRC report. That TRC report proffered up recommendations, and those recommendations are critical. It did not say transitional justice commission should be set up. It said that the special crimes court should be set up. It gives, there are steps to establishing that court. So I don't know why the Senate will want to, maneuver another way to not follow the recommendations of a process that came out of a peace agreement. Okay. Then they said to determine why the TRC recommendations have not fully or timely been implemented. We all know why the TRC recommendations have not been implemented. Tennen just said it. Because we have had in positions of power these warlords, so they have prevented this thing from happening. I think it's a mechanism to waylay the whole process and make us to feel that they are doing the right thing. Because before this government came to power, they were very clear that they wanted the establishment of the War Crimes Court. I remember, for example, Maba Molu went to Ghana when Obama came, and there was this whole hullabaloo that he met Obama and he asked for the establishment of the War Crimes Court. So I don't know why they're delaying the process.
Right.
We all know why the recommendations have not been put. I think they just put this other one there so to make the document long and to say the Senate has recommended something to determine whether the TRC has been fully complied with its mandate facing perpetrators. What does it matter? We have Supreme Court opinions when people have given decisions on court where they are dissenting opinions. What matters is that the majority pass that particular report, sign onto that report. There were issues with people dissenting. We do not talk about dissent in law. We talk about the majority. Did the majority sign the report? Yes. You have four. And you have only two commissioners signing the report. So what is your issue with legitimacy or credibility? When the Liberian people say we want our work done. So I think it's a non-issue, that particular fact, to examine the effect of the 2003 Act of Legislature
Yeah,
granting amnesty.
Attorney, let's take them one at a time, if
Okay.
I may. But the question I wanted to ask you is, you were saying as if the TRC recommendation should be law and gospel, right? After it's being put out, uh, don't the executive, the legislature, all of them, even the Liberian people, have the right to say, okay, let's do it this way or that way, or it should be implemented as is?
As is, there should be no referendum. I hear people saying there should be referendum because Dennis, the critical thing about this is it came out of a peace agreement. A peace agreement that brought an end to the civil war. It is part of that process. So there's no going back now to say, you know, after all the other ones were implemented, we're going for referendum. No, the issue of whether there should be special crimes court as recommended by the TRC is a non-issue at this particular time.
Look, Tennen, let me bring you in, but the question I have, because that's the throughout the document, this one feature prominently two
Mhm.
things. One is they say, well, the reason, the whole reason for this TRC is to promote national peace, security, unity, and reconciliation. And so restorative justice is the way to go. Why are you asking for people to be punished? And then the second thing they said was the Accra Peace, a comprehensive peace accord that gave rise to the TRC did not advise for people to be punished. If not, the warlords were not going to sign on to it. Tennen, I want you to respond to those two issues. Oh, you're still muted. Hold on. You can unmute yourself, please.
Mr. Dennis, somehow I feel like you don't want me to get into this report and you want me
No,
addressing
no,
all the things
no,
around
no.
it.
You answer those two questions and then you get into the report, because that's the because of what our attorney Joah says, like this thing should be implemented as is. Why are they going there? So I said, well, they are saying this because it's Accra and also
I
uh,
I understand, Mr. Dennis. Okay, so we will go step by step.
yeah.
Um, the Accra Peace Agreement came at the back of 16 failed agreements, or some people would say addition or whatever, court agreements. I mean, within the context of transitional justice, there are different ways it would be labeled, but again, within the international space of how it is understood, 16. There were several things happening. But what is important, those who were lobbying, at the time, were very much interested in the atrocities that were happening in Liberia. And whatever would bring peace, sanity, and stability to the conflict or the reality at hand at that time would work. Few of the things that were happening, in that moment was that, um, again, like, we're seeing them manifest, right? They were huge on impunity, flourishing, so they would protect themselves. And then that they would capture, state capture, right? They would get into political positions to, firstly, enrich themselves, but secondly, perpetuate, you know. So if you were a lobbyist then, right, the key technical words that were used, right, was styled in a way to allow the country make a decision. So In 2003, you know, so up to the point where former president Taylor had to come back, whilst I will get to that point, whilst he's in Liberia trying also to protect himself through the act that was mentioned, dubiously. And then they also, right, was echoing again. That was the context. So we're not going to mention that. We're in a we've had this is a democratic transfer of power. This is a democratic state. How do we make reference to a wartime phenomenon, to a wartime scenario as the legitimacy for how the state will operate? And no, it did not suggest that there would be, as they're making it seem, or retributive justice is too much for us, so we will lean to restorative. No. If you look out on the TRC recommendations, they are restorative and retributive. Let's come to the less technical and controversial issues. They had said, the TRC report had said that history of Liberia is complex and chaotic. Let's rewrite our history. Let's make it, with the symbols. Let's have an understanding of our, symbols, the national item, the love of liberty brought us here. Let us rework it. And I remember Dr. Elwood Dawn was the one who was leading that initiative. As Liberians, do we know where we are on it? Absolutely
No.
not. Are we interested in how far it's going? Absolutely not. Do we care to talk about it? Absolutely not. Another very, what would seem a less controversial, people are talking memorialization. So we have, this way to remember the people who were dead, the people who contributed to the peace and restoration of, stability in Liberia. A massacre, I mean, at least, right, in the heart of the city, where we have St. Peter's Lutheran, have we done anything around it as a state to recognize that a massacre happened? There are hundreds of massacre sites in Liberia. Have we? They talk to, to have it less disruptive, less political, not to shine light on the killings that happened. Someone chose a memorial all the way in Dupo Road, where by the time you drive there and that's it, with no context around it, and had the project, I mean, abandoned. And this is my critique of it, right? It is
Mm.
abandoned, laying there. If you walk there, you have no feel of, yeah, this is, a memorial. What is it? Who were killed? What does it say? How do you honor those? And how do you serve those who are living, who have to live through the memories of it? It's another very, which is really to my heart, right? Where the women of Liberia sat and pray. The state through president, we are right now. If you go through FU, there's a whole construction going on, and when statements were made, the president said, "Oh, like I if but we're postponing room there for the women to be there." Transitional justice processes, there has to be a recognition by the state that says a conflict happened, and as a
Yeah.
state, we are taking steps, right? Recognizable steps that this happened, and this is how we are responding to it. Now you're trying to pour our for fee and say we'll put space for the women, right? Which takes everything, the sanity of the space, which takes away the value, the history for that space, for the organizing, the values of the women there who were, who put their lives on the line to have peace. If we cannot deal with this less controversial issue,
Yeah.
how do you tell me that the president should apologize to Liberia on behalf of Prince Johnson, who said he fought? It was a revolution, and he
Yeah.
fought on behalf of the people of Nimba County. How do you tell me? How do you convince the Liberian people, right? That, oh, because in a report which I really want to delve into, right? You say, oh, and the TRC is illegitimate because they did not bring perpetrators and victims face to face. Really? General
Uh,
Bot Neke and me should say face to face, General Peanut Butter and the people should say face to face. to talk this stuff. You know, I mean, I am smiling, but I really am angry. There's no there's it make it seem that the people you're dealing with, right, it's either that you think of them less, you know, their comprehension is less, or you think of yourself as a demigod and you're not accountable to, which is mentioned in the report, right, that the president can choose whatever, however, because it is the onus is on him
Yeah.
to reconcile the state.
Okay. So let's go into the report. Your favorite part.
Yes.
Let's and we want to use the recommendation and the background. So we are picking each recommendation and the reason they are given for each of those recommendations, and we're going to start from the top and see how far we go. First of all, they are they are recommending and we talk about that they are recommending for the establishment of a transitional justice commission. Attorney Joah already talked on that, why is that necessary? And the first thing that this TJC will do is to determine if to determine why the TRC recommendations have not been fully and timely implemented. Before I even get to that, I was bored by the history, that they went into all round of history of Liberia, the establishment, the all the field. I'm like, you just want to
They
make
wanted
this
to validate their arguments now.
right. And he had no basis for the entire history. But let's start with the whole establishment of another commission, TJC. That's why I call it. Is this thing becoming a political football? And then the first thing they need to do is to determine whether the recommendation why it has not been fully implemented. So let's go into the report. Tennen, I give you the first shot, and we'll go one by one.
So again, I start firstly just saying how that's not a report. I would never call it a report, unfortunately. It's not. So it starts on by mentioning that the document is referencing actually the silent minority, and it doesn't care, because all this noise is, with it's the noisy majority actually, and then the silent minority are not talking. But then what is disturbing is that it lists documents as the framework. So which gives it the basis for what they are doing and why they're doing. And these are the documents, right? Which the ACRA piece are called the mention. And the 2003 Immunity Bill or Act, whatever, by President Charles Taylor. Now, let me give the context of that document and why it is unfortunate that we cannot, as a people who've gone through, 14 years of civil conflict, even want to reference that. So, President Doe, when he took over the PRC, and then, they say, rewrite the constitution. And then he put in a clause that will protect himself and the rest of the other people. President Taylor had gone to Accra and then he was served, his warrant for the tribunal in Sierra Leone. Understanding that at that point, the negotiation, he would have been, less of a force in whatever was going on. He returned to Liberia and had this law passed. I mean, at least with the understanding that it would protect him and it would protect the other people around him. This cannot be a legitimate document we reference in 2021 as the basis for, having conversations around transitional justice reconciliation. They mentioned, which is extremely good, right? The Palaver Hall mechanism as a tool, as a framework for 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 reconciliation. Um, Again, this Supreme Court opinion now into my argument. When you say, right, which you already mentioned, that they should look at the legitimacy of the TRC process and of the recommendations, right? So the transitional justice group is established. Then they will take the TRC work, which is like a 400 document plus, right? And around the legitimacy of what has happened, then they can act on, should we go further, should we not go further. However, the understanding that there already is a bias, right, towards what had happened, which they've referenced openly, that commissioners were arguing, commissioners were fighting. So I mean, in a way, the work is not credible. Let me mention for the record, there is nowhere in the world where there had been a transitional justice process that has been without a fault. There has never been. Because countries, because societies go through different stages and processes of conflict, people have got vested interests, people have got different views around reconciliation. And those views or whatever really would form their opinions, right? So it is not even a day's process. We cannot fault whatever happened with Liberia Truth and Reconciliation process and say the rest of what was, embedded is faulty, is illegitimate. Hence, we need a commission to assess, to
Yeah.
tear it apart. But what is even hypocritical is that moving forward, you're saying the truth and justice, the truth and transitional justice commission, I'm sorry, the transitional justice commission should pick some of what they had recommended to move forward with it. That's hypocritical. If the work is illegitimate, hence we cannot move with it. We trash it, we find, move around with the whole new process, right? But we do it as Liberians, we've moved past it. We need accountability, we need justice. So we cannot even move with all of this. In my mind, I'm thinking right now, why is this government using all of our resources to protect war crime? They say use alleged. No, I'm not going to use alleged, especially when people are very open and vocal about their participation, right? why
Good.
why is the state protecting them? Why is the state interested? And I conclude on this. Like a month ago, the we are government wrote the US embassy saying all of the people who they are inviting, to give statement, they should be very, careful with them, because those people lack the credibility. Those people cannot be trusted, and the state does not approve of, whatever they're involved in. Nationally, there are different mechanisms that has been employed, by the government to discredit the lived experiences of people who were killed, people who were dehumanized, people who were raped, to the interest of, think of Benina Ure, who is his advisor, Emmanuel Shaw, think of, George Bole, who's in the Senate. Why are we using our resources instead of protecting? It has to be, the government would need to answer around this. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me remind people again of the recommendation. They are kind of small, but the recommendations, and you started already, Attorney Joah, by talking about the recommendation. They want the TJC to determine, to analyze the credibility and legitimacy issues, and Tennen dealt with that, and then to examine the effect of the ratification of the Rome Statute, to consider the separation of the establishment of war crimes code, which has international dimension, and the establishment of an economic crimes code. What's your analysis of those two?
I think they just, like Tennen said, they just going back and forth. The Rome Statute and every other international humanitarian law, if you look in the TRC report, it was it was considered in the TRC report and at the Accra conference. If you look at the recommendations that led to the establishment of the commission, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the Rome Statute simply states that the Rome Statute is simply the International Criminal Court statute and provides the rules or what should be prosecuted in a criminal court. And those things are genocide, crimes against humanity. Of course, during the war, crimes against humanity occur. Crimes of aggression, those kinds of crimes, provided that they should be prosecuted under the Rome Statute. So I do not know why we are going to examine or evaluate why we should establish war crimes court in connection with the Rome Statute. I think it's a poor analysis, and I think all of that was just ejected just to make their writings valid and to ensure that the paper is big enough so that the Liberian people can say, oh yes, the Senate has done some great work. And frankly speaking, we are, even though Tennen saying that she's not disappointed. I mean, she's disappointed, but she's not surprised. I was surprised that usually we think that falls to the House of Representatives because mostly they own the claims and petition, and we saw the posture that they went to present our bill to them. But the thing is clear, instead of appeasing the people by trying to even go along with them, they trying, it's like you have a fresh soul and someone just juking in the soul to make blood to come out. And I think that is so wrong of them.
And let's look at the those justification or those recommendations. They have reason, and I want to go through few of the reason. Number one, they are talking about stability, justice. I call it peace over justice. They say against this background and given the debate in some quarters of the Liberian society about the appropriate approach to deal with the Liberian transitional justice issue following such a bitter conflict, the country finds itself at a crossroad of meeting victims' needs, including justice, while maintaining the general good of society, including peace, stability, and reconciliation in a fractured society. For the latter, the question of stability and peace overrides the quest for retributive justice. Restorative justice appear to be the most reasonable and appropriate way forward. Tennen, look like your mom phone. Go ahead, Nadine.
I do not agree. Just, impunity continues in Liberia. Just yesterday, my colleague Joseph Fire posted on his page an experience that he had in the courts. A government official, a solicitor general, I'm going to call because that was a public post that he made. The solicitor general just, somebody offend another person, then you just call and say that case, not let person call a case because I have an interest in it. Those were the challenges that existed in the justice system and in other areas during the war years, accountability. And because people still feel that they can get away with their crimes, people still rape and there's no system. People go and people do not have access to justice. And so all of these things will continue. People will still relentlessly and without conscience from our nation unless we can call to account these various crimes that have happened in the past. That you steal over much from Liberia, let the economic crimes court come to Liberia. If you kill somebody, let there be accountability, or else these things continue and will continue to manifest in other forms, if not overtly and through murder. You see police for just killing people all around the place without accountability. Those are the reasons, because they know people will only talk about it for a few times, but after let's say 2 weeks or more, the whole of Liberia, that LRB there, what did they do to that man? Nothing happened to that man. You think anything will come out of it? No. The next thing you know, he's popular and he becomes senator or representative. This is so sad for our country and our nation. It's so important, and this in retributive justice is so important because in criminal law, retributive justice is the society coming together to punish the perpetrator, to say, we, all of us together are punishing you for what you have done, and not merely Those are not the crimes that you bring for restorative justice. Every country is different in their approach to accountability for war crimes. And I think what people need at this time, you talk to the people in tennis, talk to the women, the common people in the interior side who have been affected by the crisis. Some of them still bear the marks of the war. Some of them still have trouble sleeping at night. They will tell you that we need accountability. We need these people to be prosecuted. And every time they see these people pass by, they don't or restorative justice. They think about their parents that were killed and think when these people will be held accountable for what was done to their family members or to them in particular. Okay, so all of those recommendations that were given, I think it's a farce. And I, if we are all serious, and I'm not sure that we're going to vote them out because poverty is an issue in electioneering also because they have already enriched themselves and continue to enrich themselves at our expense. So they will remain in power so that they cannot bring this. But this is, and that's why the TRC provided. I think people on that commission knew that these people were going to be in power, and they knew that they would have prohibited such a court from coming to Liberia. So they provided a way out, and they said they do not need to endorse this. All we need is the special court coming to Liberia, and I think that is the process we are on now. So their recommendations in this regard, especially the justifications that were provided, is a non-issue in itself.
Right. And I want to put one more layer on top of that before you go ahead. The same question, but on top of that, the Senate is saying the Liberian people majority, I'm implying, don't want war crimes court because or don't want the implementation of the TRC because they have voted for people who didn't campaign on those things. So in essence, hey, they don't want it. They voted for, let's say, President Sirleaf and President Weah to carry on development or tackle the economic issues. And so where you're coming from with the TRC, with TRC implementation, that's the argument.
Okay, so first the with the Rome Statute, what they're talking, Liberia is a signatory to the Rome Statute, and the Rome Statute, talks about the creation of the International Criminal Court. Um, I'm not sure what would be the context around legitimacy, as they think of it. But if their idea is that, oh, as a country, even though we've signed, we can undo what we've done, and move into a space that would not legally bind us as a country, that is wrong, extremely erroneous. So here's what war crimes and like you they're not avoidable or you cannot escape them. I'm trying to find the right word and not sound too academic, but it's not something that a country or a state can make a decision and say, oh, we don't want to do anything about the atrocities that have happened. We're going to move past it and close our eyes. No. So this is where universal jurisdiction even steps in. So universal jurisdiction say, regardless, the principle of universal jurisdiction that I focus on within the context of transitional justice, regardless of where the crime was committed, by whom it was committed, you can be prosecuted. So they can choose to look at it in whatever way, turn it upside down, right? I know, as we've seen already, the Finnish court has been back and forth in Liberia. We saw what his name just prosecuted in a Swiss court. That's like a month ago. A lot of other people, once these different jurisdictions, right, get interested, or we have official complaints through different representatives of victims, they surely can be prosecuted. Prince Johnson will not enjoy the immunity he's enjoying. And this is on the unfortunate thing, right? Because they understand within the context of sovereignty, they enjoy that protection as state people, right? So if they are traveling overseas. I heard Honorable Melvin Snow the other day bragging about, the stuff he enjoys and all of it. Yes, but this is the reason why we understand you people are trying to protect yourself, because if he was traveling as an ordinary citizen, you know another ordinary citizen can have it taken up as a civil matter, and then, or in other instances, in other jurisdiction, can get arrested. So that is an irrelevant conversation to have. Let's go back to this conversation around, oh, let's separate war crimes courts from economic crime courts, and because then we have to maintain the stability. The way the conflict operated, right? Liberia is one of the worst studied, crisis on resources or natural resources as a component that fueled, conflict. There is no way we can talk our conflict and not talk about the resources that was used as an engine. Are these people protected by the law? No way. Can the state protect them? The state cannot protect them under no jurisdiction. And I mean, Honorable and my one and only Attorney Joah, we will come to the judiciary, right? I mean, this is not to bring the judiciary to disrespect or disrepute or whatever, but there are several reports on the, faultiness, on the credibility, on the rottenness of the judiciary, unfortunately, right? And in the logic of our senators, they're saying our domestic law should be able to deal with it. In the perceptions of people, if you tell anybody right now, I mean, just a civil matter, we're going to court. They tell you, no, I don't, I'm not going to court. I'm not going to court. It doesn't, for me, once it gets to the court, I'm going to leave it there. The court is seen as the one of the, like within the governance of the state. Unfortunately, the court is just that one place where the ordinary typical Liberian person would rather not have any interaction with. This is where, in the logic of our senators, right, we should take a matter between us as, Liberians, and again, a Prince Johnson, a George Bole, and the rest of the other people. What, again, I am coming to this question. What is the motive? Who are they trying to protect? Because at this point, it is becoming very,
Themselves.
very clear that this is not about the ordinary people. It is not about reconciliation. It is not, unfortunately, about the stability of the state. It is rather about the proximity of those who are closer to the president, or the people who are in the state, right? So it's like, oh, let's dress our own a devil because we're not sure what might arise out of, and then the typical stuff you say, you haul rope haul bush. No, no rope hauling bush. It is accountability, and it is a conversation around criminal accountability. So we cannot, as a people, perpetuate. And you read this document, this is why I am so sad. It makes it seem that, the recent memory of the war years has just faded away. And then the people are trying to create a picture, right?
Right.
That, oh, everything that happened in the state was legitimate, including, right? They mentioned, oh, over 300,000 people died, but then they made it sound passive. The people who died, the people who were killed by the people who are now in power deserve to have rules, to have food,
Right.
right? Over justice. Now, I mean, just in our close on there, you see what is happening. And if we don't put our feet down as researchers, as civil society actors, as radio contributors, and whatever role we're in, we're going to miss out on this, and our society will go. I mean, not in a violent conflict, but a whole generation is going to be robbed out of what has happened, and we might just have a state that is lawless. See, what is unfolding? The judiciary, the legislature, and the executive, three separate but coordinate branches, right? The executive is supposed to provide basic social services. What we're seeing now, state capture, right? They divide 30,000 among themselves. And the lawmakers allow them, oh, the people poor. We got a billion road. Oh, the people poor. They got to go to hospital, so we're getting the hospital. I mean, the oversight, what is it there for? What then will the executive do? What then is the, what is this executive there for? Why do we have a president? I mean, they just divide the money, not on the hour on the money. I can decide what I want to do with my own money. Every citizen can make a decision on what they want to do with their money. That state capture, and if we're not careful, every single thing that concerns the governance of the country will be dealt with like that. One day, the Supreme Court will decide that, oh, as lawyers, we have the right to overrule everything, and then, we're the legal voices in this country, so we do this, and they make, the next day, the president make, an executive order and say, as president, I am the one who is supposed to control the state, and he does another thing without any check and balance. We cannot continue on this trajectory. We cannot. It's unfortunate.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia, and we are discussing the position of the Liberian Senate on the TRC recommendation. My guests, Attorney Mmonbeydo Nadine Joah and Tennen Benedictus Dalieh. Attorney Joah, the next thing is the Economic Crimes Court and all that. And I like what they say here. I want you to respond. They say, they say, it is in the opinion of the Liberian Senate that economic crimes of these two categories listed above, meaning there were some economic crimes that company used to benefit from the war, and there were some economic crimes that were used for individual benefit, not related to the war, just for their own pocket, right? They say the two categories listed above need not be prosecuted, as prosecution will be costly and time-consuming. Restitution in cash or other assets of monetary value acceptable to government is advisable. You come down, they say trying to prosecute perpetrators for economic crime will be very difficult, if not impossible. The statute of limitation under Liberian law on all economic crimes committed during the course of the civil conflict has expired. This means that any criminal action against any perpetrator of economic crime will be countered by defenses of the statute of limitation.
I think they seen it sadly to say they were operating in ignorance. They were operating in ignorance. Because if a war and economic crime court is established, it is not the state that will fund that particular war crimes court. It is the international community who are ready upon themselves. Money will be provided. What kind of money we got here to come and establish war crimes court? I think they want to play on the public sentiments of people that there's no money here, so nobody asking Liberia for their money. There is money set aside for that particular purpose. All that is needed is for us to express willingness to establish that particular court, and all the mechanism will fall into place. As for statute of limitations, everyone knows crimes are not like civil actions that have statute of limitation. There's no limitation placed on crimes. So they can say you kill somebody. If crimes had limitations, up to today, Dennis, they how they call it, and the moving by trials, and then you the transitional justice expert from the time of the Jews, the Jewish people, and people of vulnerable populations who were tortured in Germany. They're still looking for the perpetrators today, and some of them are as old as 100 years old. When they catch them, they still carry them to jail. So what kind of statute of limitations they're talking about here? The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was negotiated and agreed on in the 2000 Comprehensive Peace Agreement and enacted into law by the Transitional Legislative Assembly in 2005. When Madam Salif took over in the commission in February 2006, it reported directly to the Committee of Legislators, throughout STNU. The TRC Act authorized the TRC to hold people responsible for that were accountable for to hold those responsible for crimes, to investigate human rights and international human law violations, and all of those recommendations that they said that the TRC will do. We have already gone through all of those processes. As a result of the TRC recommendation, the Independent Human Rights Commission was established. So why are we going now to say establish another commission that will do the same work that Human Rights Commission supposed to do?
Yeah.
Because if you look at 3 of the recommendations, they said we should do Palawa Hot program. There is already, if as I was, some months ago, I worked at the Human Rights Commission, and they are already implementing the Palawa Hot program in some instances. So why are you going to do the Human Rights Commission work and go establish? Isn't that duplicity in that case? I think there's, like I said, Dennis, the whole thing is about ignorance. And I don't know, they didn't consult their own lawyers who are on their side to advise them appropriately, but they brought this piece of trash to the Liberian people so that they can say that they did something whereby any person who is in college or even in high school who have read all of these documents will trash it, because it is nothing. You get somebody, they say the time finish passing. What time? Is there a time on grief? There's no statute of limitation in crimes.
Yeah.
And they do not need the Liberian people money to establish a war crimes court. The international community is prepared, is prepared to take over that. And even when we went to the House of Representatives, we made that very clear to the commission, the people on claims. We said the Hassan Belete, who was the Global Research Justice Project man representing on our team, made it clear to them it's different process in simple Liberian English. We do not need our own money to establish the war and economic crime school. So while they put in war differently and put in economic crime, both are encompass everything. We do not need the Liberian people money. When we need money, the international people will bring that money. And that is simple as that.
Let me just inject right there, and that would be a departure from my sister's point. As a government, as a responsible government, as a government elected based on democratic tenets, we should even make a visible action by contributing to the establishment of the War Crimes Court. We do not have money, we do, and again, it does not have to be millions of dollars. It has to be this visible ceremonial, if you want to put it in that context, action by the government. The same way they see the president should apologize, the same way, they can advise the president. Can you put, they just divided 30,000 among themselves. That would amount to $1 million plus. They could take that $1 million and say this is a visible action by our government to say we recognize that our citizens were killed over 14 years. They were humiliated. People lived through. People are still living through. And this, moving forward, this is a strong statement to say our government will not encourage our country, Liberia, because it's not a, the sentiments there is that, oh, it's a Ria versus Sirleaf, no, it's not. It is the state, Liberia. It is continuity. It is the we are government as a democratically elected government saying we are taking this visible action and we are calling for criminal accountability. So we put down $1 million. Now it makes sense to reach out to other people and say, can you? But even, right, even, which again is a departure from that point, even if this government is saying, oh, we don't have money as a laissez-faire attitude, there has to be an attitude that shows, right? Whichever way, even if they do not, and that is the interesting part we need to get to, this is the gospel for the we are government. Even if you do not want it, in international law, in international politics, right? It is the same way it becomes the international collective responsibility to maintain stability in Liberia. It is the same collective responsibility. You would want to argue the principle of sovereignty and say, oh, as a sovereign state, we are supposed to make laws, right, for ourselves. We're supposed to protect ourselves. However, under the international laws, under the way we, so there are several laws, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Rome Statute, there's several other laws, Convention on the protection of women, CEDAW, and all of that. You will have to account. So I feel like this is a bluff, you know, and they're doing it to, it is not like you're not trying to scare the international community away. They're trying to shut down people who've lived through these different experiences, and put you co-opt the discourse, co-opt the willingness of people, co-opt the everything, and then you have a population that just yeah, that back on be back on. Yeah, if we not do it, Prince Johnson, my child has to go to school and he will have to go to Prince Johnson University.
but before I bring
I'm
in my
sorry, I'm not smiling.
You know
I'm
what,
trying,
Tennen?
it's an escape
uh-huh.
for the reality. I'm trying to escape from this reality, right? Like education, we're still battling literacy, right? Prince Johnson is named in the TRC report, and the president escorts Prince Johnson to, which we're saying now as the leader, the president acknowledges that he is the godfather for Nimba County. So Machana is either they will go to Nimba County Community College, they'll go to ABC, or they'll have to go to Prince Johnson University to give education, to read the history of Liberia, all the war for. Then what is, you're getting it. This is how a
Right.
whole generation is lost. And it is unfortunate that our state, right, the state is the one perpetuating this.
Right. Let me bring in one point here, because this is very profound and it goes through the entire document. It is clear, therefore, that the purpose for the establishment of the TRC was to propose measures which will ultimately reconcile the Liberian people, not to further divide them and open old wounds. According to some of the signatories of the ACPA, that is the Accra Comprehensive Peace Accord, who are still around, a South African-style truth commission was envisaged, and not the establishment of a war crimes code. That is a restorative justice process and not a retributive justice process. Is that true? Because that's the thing that continued from the beginning of the show. I played the video from former First Lady and current Vice President Joah Howard Taylor. That's the notion.
That's incorrect, unfortunately. When I made my first appearance on this show, I mentioned, right, different countries make decision on different mechanisms, transitional justice mechanisms to follow, to end into reconciliation. Um, and those different processes are based on institutions, are based on the confidence they have in the different, institutions. So in the South Africa case, right, or the South African case, if you want to put it properly, in the South African case, the judiciary was extremely independent. The state was acting, the state was, manifesting. The independence of it, yes, would be at some level, but not, it was not a total breakdown, as we have in Liberia. Like every single facet of the country was broken down. No, in South Africa, the judiciary, the courts were still very credible and independent. So the overall population, those who were lobbying, even the leader of the revolution, Mandela, opted and said, let's move to a process that we're able to talk. However, those who bear the greater burden, and this is what, if you read a text, right, in detail, not superficial reading, there are people who are taken to courts, to different courts in South Africa for their roles in the conflict.
Yeah.
However, the truth and reconciliation process, that talking part, was the one that was heralded because, again, the nature of the conflict. Now, let's come to where I am in Ireland, right? The Northern Ireland side in all of it, not the Republic. There has been extreme conflict, a whole period. However, again, they were able to sort out their conflict, through the courts. So if you had concerns, if you had, those who committed atrocities were taken to courts, the state made a recognition. Even to today, there are documentaries, there are different things that recognize what had happened. People
Yeah.
talk about it. There are films, there are murals. You are passing, you see, oh, this person was killed by this person. So it's first there the recognition that something happened, and then the ownership, right? So Prince Johnson killed Doe, and there's no explanation why you killed Doe. Prince Johnson killed Doe, right? This person killed Doe. If this person killed this person, no explanation or justification. Well, so what they're saying is incorrect.
All right.
Again, just
Th-
concluding, again, what has happened in Liberia, right? Based on the nature of the conflict and based on those who were lobbying with the three rebel faction and the many political parties, right? It was okay. At this point, what we want is the cessation of hostilities, and we need you people to go back and talk. And then this TRC process, right, would help all of it, will define, will set a framework or a roadmap.
Thank you. Attorney Joah, there are three things. Okay. We don't want to, I don't know whether you agree with me or not, that the entire document you call it trash, but here are some things in the document I want to point at. Number one, this reparation trust form, the president should apologize, and then the TRC documents should be archived. Those are good stuff, right?
Um,
No, I can say those are good stuff in a way, but you can they call for reparation. All of that is already mentioned in a TRC report. In addition to the establishment of a of a war crimes code, and so they cannot come again and make another document. We are good at crafting documents, and there was no need for this particular document. They talk about reparations. They talk about government. Why should we teach our children that people who don't commit crime should apologize for another person who is personally visible and is unapologetic about his role in a civil crisis? What are we telling our children? That means they should not account for whatever they have done. They will grow up to commit the same things over and over. They will feel that when you do somebody wrong, you can go with impunity.
your mom will
This is not,
apologize.
yeah, my mom will apologize for me. Yeah,
But wait
I,
now, the
and
president.
you just talking there and laughing because I've seen where workers go to work. 18 year an adult person has gone to work, and you offend your boss or the laws of the institution. Then you go home and say you bring in your mom, your pa, and everybody to go to your working place to apologize on your behalf. I see
But
where this comes from. I think that is the idea behind this. It will continue to perpetuate itself. Why should the president of Liberia offer a future apology on
but
behalf of
Attorney
and
Joa,
women into the state and they committed crimes
let, let me
against humanity?
let me
Yeah.
interrupt you a little bit. there's a precedent to this, right? To that part, right? President Sirleaf apologized on behalf or took full responsibility for what her son did. So maybe that's the precedent. What's your take?
But the same thing we're talking here, Dennis. Crimes are not transferable. Nobody should be able to apologize. I can apologize on behalf of my daughter when she right here and she the one committed the crime. Why should President Weah apologize for anybody? When Prince Johnson is here, he speaks every day, or every Sunday in his church, and he just add fresh sword. He make the sword fresh every time. Every time Sunday go over it, he speaks. And he speaks that in a manner that aggravates people who he slapped during the war, people who he committed these atrocities, uh, 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 you know, onto. So there's no reason. It will just encourage impunity further in our society. So there's
Thank
no
you.
reason that I don't see the reason. Like I said, all of these recommendations are not in place. Some of them have already been implemented or are in the process of being implemented. Then they talk about the Palawa Hut, the war memorials. I know at the INCHR, there were memorials that were started by the INCHR, but even the process surrounding making the people to own these memorials is sadly lacking. For example, in the INCHR bill, a memorial there. So John Colley went there and asked the people why this memorial was built. The person said that the people they Jackie they built it here. He said the people say they spend 1 billion on it. He said that plenty of money. I don't think the people they spend that money on it. The other woman said for yellow water here we still drinking. People die in the water during the war. We still drinking that water. So the process around ownership of these memorials is slightly lacking. The processes are there, but the process around implementation of these various recommendations, the recommendations are there, but the processes around the implementation of these various, recommendations is also important. You cannot have a recommendation already standing, people already implementing, then you come and weigh the whole process. Like Sally has said, like I said, it wasn't necessary. The Truth and Justice Commission just, you know, uh, uh, it's just there to substitute the work of the Independent Human Rights Commission. And I don't think it will follow or it will be in place if we even consider it.
Thank
Like I
you.
said, they should go and read again. The writers of the Senate need to go and research and call people to see whether these things are realistic.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Atty from Pennsylvania, and you're watching Focus on Liberia.
So let me bring in some of our comments from our readers, from our listeners, those watching us. Let me start with this one by Nimlan. Nimlan say, I think we have to drop or forget about this implementation of the TRC because it is very high uphill battle. General amnesty was given, so I think we have to move on. Tennen,
Who
you
gave
want?
general amnesty? Can you speak on that? Because
No, so let just what Anthony Joah was talking about, beginning with memorialization and all of it, right? It is, again, it is unfortunate. So the document that is then referenced by the Senate is erroneous, right? So if you look at the legislative processes, the way it is done, right, a law cannot be passed in 5 days or 6 days. It's not possible. It has to go for deliberation on all of it. And the Senate normally will, they both houses would have different days, so it's two senators and all of. I mean, I'm not very versed in legislative politics, but the 2003 general amnesty law that's been referenced is totally bogus and erroneous and cannot be the basis for any action. But what is interesting, right, is the hypocrisy around this, right? Double standard. On one end, you say the TRC report is illegitimate, it did not consider several things, the commissioners were arguing, were fighting. But then in another breath, you say, oh, yeah, at the CPA, the people say that the TRC won't do. So everything what the TRC do, I will choose which one I will pick. If this government is interested in giving jobs to a few people who, they think can, push for this, instead of trying to put them in some transitional justice commission, make them lobbyists. You know, in democratic processes, you have these kind of people who will push, your position. It's easy, it's logical, right? So we know that these people are the people who have the opinion of the government in taking a particular position, in taking a particular line. They do not want a crimes court, right? They want us to settle for, oh yeah, let back on be back on. Jesus will come and Jesus will pay all of our debt. So therefore, care about it, right? Or Allah will come and Allah will forget, will pay everybody debt, and then that forget about it, right? If we want to go with that, if this is the position of the government, own it with your chest, hold it, be versed, pay these people who you want to give that job to in consulting roles, but it should not be again, because when you create this transitional justice commission, it becomes the position of the government. You are using our resources, the same resources you say you do not have for a war crimes court. You are using it for a transitional justice, commission that would amount to nothing, that would push your line. So just find lobbyists, find these people, give them jobs, make them consultants, and then we move on. But what as a people, and I think this is where sometimes I feel like this is where my generation comes in. We will not, I tell you, in Germany, in other states, several hundred years after atrocities were committed, the families of those who committed it were prosecuted. I mean, it's not like you're standing in court and it's like, oh, you did it, but your family would take responsibility. The state would, there would be some accountability.
Yeah.
And if this government, considers that, restorative, and this is just stepping back a little, I feel like if you ask these people what restorative justice is, they really do not know. It is a shield for just saying there should not be criminal accountability. People do not know what restorative justice is, what retributive justice is, how do they function, in what different dynamics do they operate. But people would jump at, oh, let there be restorative justice. So restorative justice say no court, and retributive justice say court. I mean, to sound as simplistic as that, and this is the national position of a country that is 174 years of age. This is unfortunate.
Let me bring
And the
in a few more
people who
comments.
lost their lives
Yeah.
must get accountability, criminal accountability.
And they keep saying, okay, let's reconcile, let's have peace over just, reconciliation. If you killed my father, in my case, LPC headed by George Bullard killed my father and burned my town, right? And you're saying, let's reconcile. I don't know what the process is and what will be the litmus test that this reconciliation has taken place. Who is there to evaluate that we have succeeded or not? Jackie Sire is saying, there are too many lies about the war crimes code by officials who benefited from the war. Context matters. People try to bring other countries' context to Liberia. She continues, the Rwanda genocide cost over $1 billion. Unless there is a political will from our government, nothing will be accomplished. The war crimes must come as a deterrent and to bring justice. Franklin, there will be no realistic peace, reconciliation, and development in Liberia without the establishment of the TRC WCC to its fullest. I envisage another war within few decades. Ghibli wants some people afraid of Prince Johnson, but they are not afraid of President Weah. During Ellen Johnson's time, Liberia so afraid they can not understanding that very well.
They can't talk.
We must bring the War and Economic Crimes Code so that people who committed crimes bear consequences and those who didn't be exempted. We need accountability. We are quick to call people father and mother. So how can you take your father or mother to jail? This last one, and before we conclude this, and this is Jerome Gilman say, what proof you have that people, stole money? The same Nimla say, I don't know how we will agree for economic crime code when we ourselves are currently stealing from ourselves, the country. Attorney Joah, the few comments, your response.
I'm just laughing at the, the one they say we going to call people father and mother. And, and look at the fight. I just laughing because I told my children sometimes I go and they should call everybody by their name beside them. They only have only one uncle. So they should calling for uncle and auntie. And I think that is the background that the vice president was speaking from. We quick to own our people, family. Liberia is so small. Just recently, as people started dying from the coronavirus, he said, "Oh, you know the person? Yes, I know the person because we see each other every time. Everybody's so connected." But if we say because of that, there should not be accountability. That means for other crimes in our society, there shouldn't be accountability at all.
Exactly.
And this is the
Including
reason
rape.
why people continue to are coming there. There's a reason why people continue to rape and compromise these cases in
They
the
tell to
corners.
the pastor
We
is
need to
free.
tell pastor commit rape, a brother commit rape, they keep it because crimes committed are not the responsibility of each individual. It's the responsibility of the state. That is a Republic of Liberia against the perpetrator because the whole society found on that crime to the extent that you must be prosecuted. I individually can forgive you, but it is not the responsibility of the whole
Yeah.
society to
To
forgive you
forgive
for your
you, yes.
crimes. You understand? So for you to say, we connect, we may be connected, but it does not erase the fact that we should bring those perpetrators to account, or else the armed robbery, the flagrant, the violations, the stealing, the rape, the sexual violence that happen in our country, abuse for the justice system will continue. They who know you think it will continue in our society because people will feel they can go and just like that without, I don't use the accountability word so much, but I said without accountability, which is wrong for our society. The reason, I'm not the expert here, but I think the reason and why the Rwandans and the South Africans were able to turn this thing around is because in the Sierra Leoneans, you see Sierra Leone right down there. Me, I know about Sierra Leone, and I know about all the various countries they will speak to that. But the reason we see Sierra Leone doing so well is because they brought the perpetrators to justice. And anybody now trying to go and bring war in our country, they will call you to account and you will face justice. So they're not
Yeah.
going back just now. The only thing that helping us is because somebody said a country who has bled sufficiently will not really want to go back to war. So to 1990 up to now, almost 20 years, we have bled sufficiently that everybody tired now. But the young ones coming up, they're seeing commando still. They hearing the romance about the war. They want to be in those situations too. So now we see land conflict in Nimba. We see this, we see that. If we're not careful, if we're not careful, we will have a generation who have not bled, who have not seen the devastation of the war, especially now that history civics is sadly lacking in our institution, in recent history are not being taught sufficiently to
All
know the
distorted.
victories of the war. They, they will, they will, they, The recollections of the war will seem so romantic to these younger ones that they will want to experience their generations of war and they will bring it back. So we have to be very careful. Our generation should not pass. We must call them to account before they die, because they cannot die in peace. We cannot and must not allow them to die in peace. They must be held to account for Liberia to be free.
Thank you. That's it. Tennen, please answer this last question, and then we're going to go to our conclusion. Is it true that Liberia is a signatory to the ICC, but the ICC cannot establish war crime court in Liberia? That's from Nehemiah Wardrobe.
So the ICC is an institution, and the Rome Statute is a law. So the law gives birth to the institution, just for the clarity. But then there is a jurisdictional. Okay, so break it down. The court, right? ICC as a court has a limit. So they cannot look into a conflict beyond their years. And that would be 2003, 2000, yes, 2003. They cannot look beyond any matter after 2003, right? So, and the Liberian civil conflict began as of 1989, right? So, no, they cannot look into Liberia's civil conflict. That is for the answer. However, a special crimes court, and what we're saying, a war crimes court, it has to fit within our context. Like you see, like Sierra Leone, it was a tribunal. In Rwanda, it was a tribunal. It has to fit within our context, right? Can be established to adjudicate all war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, massacre, and all of it.
Thank you. Go ahead, finish your thought.
Sorry?
No, I said finish your thought. You were saying something.
No, I was saying, as a country, right, we can make, and this is what civil societies groups, advocacy groups are pushing around, that understanding the context of our civil conflict, we don't just want a war crimes court, we want a war and economic crime court, and that was also embedded in the recommendation of the TRC.
Thank you. William King said, not to be political, but if the war crimes court is not established for accountability and justice, I think the incumbent administration will be severely challenged in convincing voters for a second term. The Senate representative breeds more distrust for our legislature. Critical times for Liberia, we stand at a crossroad. Ladies, thank you so much for the discussion. I know this discussion like this can go for hours. 24-page document, we're just scratching the surface. But thank you so much for your input. Let me go around the room and get your parting comment. And at the end of your comment, how do we move forward? I mean, what's the future? The senator, the president, I know because this same thing happened during President Sirleaf's time, just trickle in, bits and pieces, and nothing happened. So what is the future of the process being initiated by the president, from the president to the Senate, from the Senate back to the president? Where do we go from here? Conclude with those thoughts. Let me start with Tennen. Okay.
Attorney Let me start from a woman and the expert. She will talk all the thing here about transitional justice. So we cannot start this process in the middle. Liberia Truth and Reconciliation Commission already did a lot of work going around the country, validating 20,000 different experiences from people. They recommended the Extraordinary Criminal Court of Liberia. So Liberia victims need justice. We need it for future accountability so that people cannot go with impunity. So what is the next step now? I will just be very brief. The Liberian government and President Weah in the Liberian legislature, all they need to do is to request assistance from the United Nations for establishing a war crimes court along with Liberia's other international partners such as Germany, such as the European Union, the African Union, the United States, United Kingdom, and all its partners. They should request uh, support, and that support will come so that this crime can be established, that our people who have suffered can be free curse, of this curse of impunity on Liberia. Thank you for inviting me, Dennis, and I was glad I took part on the program.
Thank you so much for always availing yourself. Miss Dalieh.
Just concluding, I will want to start off reassuring the Liberian population. Um, there's no society wherever in the world that seeking criminal accountability resulted into a civil conflict. The reverse leads to civil conflict. By allowing, you know, impunity to flourish, by allowing our criminals to be, our public officials, these are the things that lead, a country to civil conflict and not seeking criminal accountability. What we have around the false sentiment, the, echoing, the elevation of the voices of criminals, war criminals, it's just but for a time. And within a moment, those people, once brought to justice, the power they have now, the force they have would become irrelevant, and you would see what true peace is and not what the false peace we're currently experiencing in Liberia. The second part for it, and not to sound prescriptive, you ask what is the future. Um, and this is what I'm still studying. I mean, again, I'm saying not to sound prescriptive, but then it seemed to me if we continue like this, the future around accountability, criminal accountability, may lie in universal jurisdiction, right? And I think this is what we have to start studying as researchers, as journalists, as advocates around war crimes and all of it. How can we seek justice in foreign jurisdiction? As it is, the political will there seem, is allowing for, these people to continue to exert themselves. So if we can get justice from foreign jurisdiction, that's it, right? We have the UK government is very present in Liberia. They've provided support, financial support. They've been leading on governance issues in Liberia. They can help take up different cases and prosecute people. We have the Irish government in Liberia also. They are key on, they're providing support to the Ministry of Health and several other different, the Justice Ministry, all of it. We will need these different governments, the Swedish government, also the US government, which is a long-standing partner. The Swiss government is huge. Also, we have, there are several governments who are working, with the Liberian government to continue working with the Liberian government that is bent on, pushing impunity, legitimizes whatever they're doing. And this message is sent to the common people, right? Because if Prince Johnson is talking, he says, oh, like he was serving in a, as head of the security stuff, I'm sorry, at the Senate, right? And he echoes his position. If you're acting our bar and the US government interacting with me, we can go to security meeting, they can hear me if they want, you know. You are legitimizing, you're interacting with these people who are abusers. So the onus is on these governments, right, to stand and say, this is the position of our governments. We cannot interact with war criminals. We cannot. And a further action would be, right, to provide support to local organizations or international organizations that are working around universal jurisdiction to ensure that these criminals are brought to justice. Because at the end of the day, I'm concluding on this, right? The
Okay.
collective will of the collective burden or will of the international community to bring peace, to broker peace in a country is equally the same, So if they will sit there and see Liberia not address impunity, if we ever return to conflict because of all these unaddressed issues, it will be their collective burden, right, to bring peace. So we don't want to go in a cycle. We want to ensure these governments must help the Liberian people and ensure that these war criminals are brought to justice. Thank you so kindly. Thank you for the platform.
Thank you so much for your time, and both of you for your expertise, and all. And every time we call on you, you are here. Tomorrow, guess what? We are bringing a member of the former TRC commissioner, Mr. John H.T. Stewart, and we're going to continue this TRC conversation. We want to hear from John. What were some of the important issues of interest? Who were some of the important witnesses, and what we learned from them? And specifically, we want to talk about the 1980 coup. And from a TRC perspective, he's going to give the Senate his response to the Senate's position and overall the future of TRC. I mean, the time is so short, we are still alive, and there are so many distortions about what's going on. History being distorted. In fact, some say the Accra Peace Agreement said one thing, other people say no. Oh no, we got, and all these things. So John H.T. Stewart will be our guest tomorrow. But again, I want to thank all of you for coming. Those watching us, we want to say thank you so much for continuing to support us. Focus on Liberia. We educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. If you want to cut through the fluff, the noise, and all the G's and the fries, this is where you need to be. So thank you for your continual support and continuing to watch us right here and Focus on Liberia. Until then, whether you believe in a retributive, restorative, or you believe the president should apologize and everything stay the same, or you believe that because no political party is running or campaigning on TRC, so it's a non-issue, whatever your belief, we are all Liberians, and it is our duty to make sure that our country remains the glorious, or be the glorious land of liberty. Good day and God bless. Enjoy your weekend.
We are Liberians.